Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, with chilling rain just a few days away from official release, it's time to count down our top 20 cards from the set. We have gotten to that point, as we have for a little while now, where the sets are so gosh darned big and there's so many interesting cards. Top 10s are, aspirational at best. Now, usual rules apply here. I'm going partly on what is doing well over in Japan, because bearing in mind a lot of these cards have been legal in Japan for a while now, and I'm also focusing on what I think could be good in the future. Although, shout out to Lipard V, I'm not putting Lipard V on the list. Lipard V's got the really nice Hidden Claw ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may discard a Pokemon tool from a Pokemon. And look, at the moment, the way it stands, with Tool Scrapper in the format, ain't no one going to be playing this card. Well, few people. Although it is far, far more easily searched than Tool Scrapper, just use a Quick Ball. But as good as it might be now, if Tool Scrapper rotates out in a year's time without a replacement, Lipard becomes a billion times better. So starting in then at number 20, we've got BEEDRILL. Now, BEEDRILL's a fun little card, 1 grass energy. If your opponent's active Pokemon has any special energy attached to it, instant KO for a single energy. Now, bearing in mind this is a single strike Pokemon, it means you can use Mustard to play this from your deck. You can play 1 copy of BEEDRILL, play it from your deck just as basically a basic Pokemon, although not in name. Using Mustard, attach a grass energy or anything that will count as it, 1-hit KO. Tell me there's not a lot of potential here, ladies and gentlemen. We might have to have an argument. In at number 19, we've got BLISSEY. And it's a very similar thing going on here. This is largely on potential, rather than I know that it's going to start smashing in the next 5 minutes. But you see, as much as you're immune to special conditions, and that, well, you remove them every time you attach an energy, it's near enough. That's cool. But for 1 energy, you do 10 damage, plus 30 more for each energy attached to this Pokemon, and if you deal any damage with the attack, you can attach up to 3 energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. Plus, you got 250 HP as a basic Pokemon V. There is potential here for an absolute powerhouse. In at number 18, we got another single strike Pokemon. It is CINDERACE. And CINDERACE is because it's a single strike Pokemon. The ability says that your attacks do 30 more damage for each prize card your opponent's taken, and for 2 energy you do 150 damage. If, however, your opponent's taken 5 prizes, it's the end of the game, it's coming down to it, you deal 300 damage. And I've already mentioned that we can use Mustard to get this into play more easily. Houndoom will accelerate a single strike energy, and must be noted that will also do an extra 20 damage. So as long as you've got a Houndoom in play, you can use Mustard to play this, use Houndoom to accelerate an energy, attach a fire, and you're doing 320 damage out of the blue at the end of the game. This is another one which I think could make its way into a bunch of single strike decks. In at number 17, a card which I think there is a definite chance I've put too low. It is Old Cemetery. When you attach any player, either player, both players, an energy to a non-psychic Pokemon, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. We've seen cards like this before, and they saw a little bit of play. Frozen City for Plasma Pokemon would be an example. The fact of the matter is, if you're playing a Psychic deck, you can play this just to screw with your opponent. But even in a non-psychic deck, you can play this in a matchup where it doesn't matter if you take damage, but it does matter if your opponent does. Or a Pokemon like Phanpy that has an outrage attack can take advantage of this to do a little bit of extra damage. I really like this card. The more I look at it, the more I think 17 is far too low, but I've said it now. So let's move on to a pair of Pokemon in at number 16, MALAMAR and LYCANROC. Now, if you're asking me for my favourite cards from the set, it's these two. These are the 2 cards from the set that really get me deck building juices flowing. I think there is a phenomenal amount of potential with these 2 cards. MALAMAR for a single energy. You reveal any number of Rapid Strike cards in your hand, deal 40 for each one you revealed, and then shuffle them into your deck. LYCANROC for 2 energy, but bearing in mind Houndoom, so you'll be fine. Does 80 damage, plus 10 for each single strike Pokemon in your discard pile. And the way I see these working is as toolbox decks. I play a bunch of random Rapid Strike Pokemon to counter the meta in a Malamar deck, or a bunch of single strike Pokemon to counter the meta in a LYCANROC deck. And nominally, Malamar and LYCANROC are my main attackers, but I can muck about and play basically whatever Pokemon I like as long as they are single or Rapid Strike. I think there is a lot of potential here. In at number 15, I'm cheating again, but this is actually the last time I will in this video, which is unusual. I usually cheat a lot more than this. We've got the combination of Cresselia and Fog Crystal. Basically, the new Psychic support cards. Cresselia is basically Volcanion, but for Psychic Pokemon. It's got an attack that accelerates energy, and it's a decent single prize attacker. So that's going to work very nicely, just like Volcanion did. And Fog Crystal is Netball, which is to say, but for Psychic Pokemon, obviously, which is to say you can search for a basic Psychic Energy or basic Psychic Pokemon, and Netball saw a bunch of play in grass decks. So if you're giving me 2 cards that we've basically already seen for other typings that saw a huge amount of play, I don't think it's really unusual to predict that they might see a fair bunch of play this time round. But for Psychic Pokemon. In at number 14, we've got ZERAORA V. Now, ZERAORA V does have an awkward free energy attack, which means even though it's a Rapid Strike Pokemon, you still can't pay the energy cost completely using Rapid Strike energy, which does make me kind of sad. However, you do 100 damage, but if any of your Rapid Strike Pokemon used an attack during your last turn, you actually do 160 to one of your opponent's benched as well. I'm going to have to spoil the surprise for a moment and tell you that yes, obviously Passimian is coming up later in the list. That lets your Rapid Strike Pokemon do an extra 30 when you hit the bench. And let's not forget the Telescopic Sight is still a thing. Only extra damage to GXs and Vs, obviously. But with the pair of those cards, Passimian and Telescopic Sight, you're not hitting 160 to the bench, you're hitting 220. And 220 is, outside of very rare exceptions like the aforementioned BLISSEY, what you need to get a KO on Pokemon V. So sure, it's slightly awkward energy cost-wise, but you attack with a Rapid Strike Pokemon and then you do 100 to the active and KO a bench Pokemon V. Yes. That sounds good to me. And don't forget, we've had an official ruling. You can chain ZERAORA. So your Pokemon that used an attack last turn can't be the same ZERAORA, but it can be a different one. In at number 13, we've got MELONY. Now, MELONY lets you draw 3 cards while you attach a water energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon V. And it's not Welder, but it's not a million miles away from Welder. Now look, Welder attached 2 fire energy from your hand, that's better than 1 from your discard. But we're going to see a water Pokemon coming up in the not too distant future that needs 2 water energy per turn. MELONY will be there quite nicely. Yeah, there's an argument that right now Frostmoth gives really good energy acceleration to water. But firstly, MELONY's going to last in the format a year longer than Frostmoth. Secondly, sometimes you just need 1 extra energy. You don't want to have to get a stage 1 Pokemon into play that's a 90 HP liability. No, MELONY seems pretty good. While we're talking supporters, in at number 12, we've got Karen's Conviction. And I am convinced that this is going to just end a bunch of games. What it does is, when you play it, all of your single strike Pokemon's attacks do an extra 20 damage to your opponent's active for each prize card your opponent has taken. So if it's near the end of the game and your opponent's taken 5 prize cards, you do an extra 100 damage. Basically, in a single strike deck, Karen's Conviction is going to get KOs that shouldn't exist. It's going to allow you to KO Pokemon you should not be able to KO. It is going to turn the tide of the game. It is going to make people go, oh, I really want to take this KO, but if I take this KO, then I'm potentially putting my opponent in a position to take a big KO next turn, so I'm going to have to wait. And here's my point, ladies and gentlemen. I adore this card. I think there is a huge amount of potential, and I think if single strike decks see play, this is going to swing some games. And while we are in our supporter run of the video, how about in at number 11, we've got Avery. Now, Avery's another one of those cards that can't quite make up its mind what it wants to do, and it's not phenomenal at either thing, but as a whole, it's pretty gosh darn good. Now, drawing 3 cards clearly isn't good, because we've got Hop, and Hop isn't a good card. But this is not just Hop. This is like the world's most annoying Hop. Because if you drew any cards, and that's the key point here, if you got more than 3 cards in hand, this won't do anything. Your opponent discards Pokemon from the bench until they have 3. And the obvious use for this is with Eternatus. Your opponent does extra damage based on the number of bench Pokemon they have, so limit their bench. But there's so much more you can do here other than just annoy Eternatus. We've seen things like this before, and the fact of the matter is, I mean, Parallel City is a nice example here. And basically, if your opponent suddenly has to discard 2 Pokemon from their bench, I mean, I hate to say it to you, but they might not want to. They might not be in a position to, and that is going to be an absolute win for you. In at number 10, we've got that aforementioned Passimian. And it's partly because it lets your Rapid Strike Pokemon deal extra damage to the bench, and it's partly because it combines with Telescopic Sight. I mean, Passimian does 20 damage as a basic Pokemon to one of your opponents. It's fine, but it's not good. But when you combine its ability in Telescopic Sight, all of a sudden that's 80, and that is going to start putting Pokemon in range very, very quickly. I've already mentioned how great this is with ZERAORA, but we could also mention Urshifu here. Urshifu, Rapid Strike obviously, we're talking Rapid Strike, does 120 to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. But now, if you combine Passimian and Telescopic Sight, that's 180 to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, as long as they're benched, and that's a KO on Crobat and Kricketune, 2 prized Pokemon that will often be sitting on the bench for your opponents. And that's kind of my point here. If we've got potentially a couple different broken combos already, and we've barely started, that tells you how good this can be. In at number 9, another card which I think I may have put way too low. It is Echoing Horn. Now the potential here is easy to see. It is an item card, and it lets you, now it is nominally a Rapid Strike card, but that doesn't really matter. It lets you put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile onto their bench. And although there's uses, your Pokemon that do damage based on your opponent's bench and all of that rubbish, it's largely so you can combo it with something like Boss's Orders to take super cheeky KOs. Combo it with Boss's Orders to KO a Crobat for 2 easy prizes, ignoring your opponent's big Pokemon VMAX in the active. The thing is, we saw this before. This is just a reprint of Target Whistle. And although Target Whistle was a good card and saw some play, it was a fringe card that saw a bit of play here and there. It was not a card that saw a huge amount of play everywhere, and that's kind of why it doesn't end up being any higher here, because as much as there's a huge amount of potential, and there is, I could still see this being like before, where it just was a nice little fringe card. In at number 8, we've got Galarian Articuno V. And this is a card which I adore. Now, the attack I don't care about even a little bit. I don't know if anybody does. But the ability says that once during your turn, you may discard 2 cards from your hand and draw a card. Now, I know you're dropping 2 cards and drawing 1, but firstly, you get to draw a card. If you're desperate for a Boss's Orders to try and win the game, this will give you another chance to draw it. But more than that, we got combos with stuff like Kricketune. Kricketune draws until you've got 4 cards in hand if it's active, 3 if it's on the bench. So you can empty out your hand with Galarian Articuno, so you can then draw more with this. Or you might be playing something like the aforementioned LYCANROC, where actually what you really want to be able to do is discard a lot of cards as fast as you can. And because we've got drawing, and discarding cards which we might want to do, and emptying our hand to combo with other draw cards, that all adds up to an awful lot of fun. Now, in at number 7, we've got Peonia, which annoyingly breaks up my run of the Galarian birds. I did have them all in a row. I had to add Peonia in here. I wanted all 3 of the birds in a row, but I think this is a better card than Galarian Articuno. Having said that, I'm not terribly stuck to that idea, so I don't really know. But it's the best we've got for playing with a discard pile. You put up to 3 prize cards into your hand, and then for each prize card you put in your hand this way, you put a card from your hand face down as a prize card. Now, firstly, this lets you get cards from your prizes. I mean, half of them basically, which is awesome. As a side note, no, you can't do this if you don't have the cards to put back down. You can't use it to draw prizes. If you could, then empty your hand, play Peonia, win the game. It would be the best card we've maybe ever seen. It doesn't do that. That would be actually broken. But it lets you get cards from your prizes, which other cards don't. And it also lets you fix your prizes. So the cards you put down from your hand, you just get to put down, and you know exactly where they are. And not in this set, but in the next set, Evolving Skies, we've got cards like Dream Ball. Dream Ball lets you search for any Pokemon whatsoever and bench it. And yes, I did say Pokemon, I did not say basic. So you can bench a stage 1 or stage 2 using Dream Ball. The problem is you've got to draw it as a face down prize card, or else it doesn't work. So there's another use for Peonia. This card's going to see some love. In at number 6, we've got Galarian Moltres V. Again, it's got an attack, but we're largely focused on the ability. Once during your turn, you can attach a Darkness Energy from your discard to Galarian Moltres. And you can either keep it there and build up a free attacker. 190-30 to yourself isn't great, but it's fine. Or you can combo it with stuff like Energy Switch to get the energy where you actually want to go. And that's kind of awesome. Do remember that pre-rotation we do have Weavile that will move the energy around super easily, but that's not going to last too long, so don't get too excited, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen. Don't get too excited. In at number 5, we got the best of the Galarian birds. It's Galarian Zapdos. And I do think the top 5 in this set is a redonku good top 5. Now, Galarian Zapdos has got an ability that says for each one of your opponent's Pokemon Vs in play, you reduce the attack cost of this Pokemon by 1 colorless energy. Basically, if your opponent's got 3 Pokemon Vs, for 1 fighting energy, you do 170 damage, and you discard a special energy before you damage. That's actually really important, because if your opponent tries using something like Weakness Guard energy, you'll discard it before you do damage. Or you could just use Aurora energy here. Any fighting or Aurora energy deck, you've got to consider playing this one very, very strongly. Not to mention you hit weakness on and are a phenomenal counter to Eternatus. And it's not out yet, but at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to get Gengar VMAX, which is looking like the best deck in Japan right now. And you're a pretty phenomenal counter to that as well. It can be played as a one-off in so many decks. And it counters so many things. Even if you're not going after these big VMAX decks, you hit weakness on Crobat V and get a pretty easy KO. This is a card which you need 1 or 2 copies of this because you should be putting it in a lot of decks. In at number 4, a card which I frankly completely undersold when I first saw it. It's Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. I did not think this was going to be a powerhouse deck. But for 2 energy, you do 10 damage plus 30 more for each of your opponent's bench. 160 for 2 energy is quite nice. But for 2 water energy, you do 10 damage, discarding up to 2 water energy, and doing 120 more for each energy you discarded in this way, or each card. So that means that if you get 2 water energy on and discard them, 250 for 2 energy. And this is incidentally where Melony comes in beautifully. Yeah. On a big VMAX, that is extremely efficient. And bearing in mind, you're one-hit KOing Pokemon Vs, and VMAXs generally don't one-hit KO each other anyway, they 2-hit KO. And for 2 energy, you're getting a pretty easy 2-hit KO. And then you can combine it with stuff like Cheryl, because you're getting rid of all your energy anyway, so you might as well heal, because you're not losing any energy, because you've already lost it all. Obviously, you can't play that and Melony on the same turn. You'll have to figure that one out. The point is, I completely undersold this card as an also-ran, and it turns out it is, since it came out, has been one of the very, very best decks in the game. It is an absolute top-tier deck in Japan, and I see no reason whatsoever that wouldn't carry on over here. In at number 3, we've got Path to the Peak. And Path to the Peak should become one of the most played stadium cards for the entire time it's legal. Any Pokemon with a rule box, Pokemon V, GX, V Union, etc., have no abilities. And this turns off so much. Yes, it's another really good counter to Eternatus, even though there's a bunch of them. Eternatus has been crushing in Japan, even with all these counters. It's a bit weird. But it turns off things like Kricketune to draw cards. And a billion other things. It's Power Plant, but better. Power Plant only worked on GXs and basically got rotated early, so to speak, or EXs as well. When Pokemon Vs got better, this just got a bit worse and then just dropped out of play. But because of the wording on Path to the Peak, it's not going to get soft rotated by the emergence of new types of cards. So Power Plants are a huge amount of play and really did just hurt so many decks. This is better than that. Because it's that, but it also blocks more stuff. It's great. In at number 2, we've got Inteleon, and honestly, I was so close to putting this at number 1. Because if you go and look at the Japanese metagame at the moment, you will see a billion different builds, all of which are playing this card. Now, it's got the same ability as the old Decidueye. Once during your turn, drop 2 damage counters. But the difference is you've got that Rapid Strike Mustard that lets you play any Rapid Strike Pokemon from your discard, which is different to the other Mustard, which is placed on the deck, and just play it straight to your bench. So you discard it, and then if this is the only card in your hand, you draw 5 cards and you play Inteleon from your discard onto your bench. You don't have to do the whole evolving thing, though of course you can. And then you're just dropping extra damage counters. And I have seen this played with so many things. I've seen it played with Inteleon VMAX. I've seen it played with Dragapult. I've seen it played with Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. And those are just examples. There are so many more things you can do here. It fits into so many decks. It's ridiculous. I could easily have put it as number 1. And to be honest with you, a bunch of other sets, I would have put it at number 1 easily. But when I saw Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, I told you it was the best card we've seen in years. And that is what stops me putting Inteleon in at number 1. Now, Shadow Rider Calyrex has not been quite as good as I was expecting over in Japan at the moment. But do bear in mind it is still extremely early. And when I say quite as good, it has won a bunch of tournaments over there. It is one of the top decks. But I was expecting full-on domination. It's not there yet, but this is such an exciting card. It's got an ability that lets you attach a Psychic Energy and draw 2 cards, which is clearly ridiculous. And then the attack does 10 damage plus 30 more for each Psychic Energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So if you start just piling Psychic Energy on, you can just start sweeping everything. Or just don't play it as its own deck. Just play it as a support Pokemon in other Psychic decks. That will still work very nicely indeed. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I do think the top 5 for Chilling Reign is a very, very strong top 5. But there are some very good cards in this set. And even down the bottom rungs of this list, where it's not maybe quite as good as the top, there are still some super interesting cards that can make a big difference. But I want to know what you think. So let me know in the comment section, would ya? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that fun stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.